Hey, welcome back to the Group Project Podcast, episode number 76. I am here with the 2021 Michigan String Teacher of the Year. His name is Mr. Jonathan Glawe. Mr. Glawe, Jonathan, how you doing, man?
I'm doing terrific. Thank you so much, Jared, for having me on here.
So we talked a couple months ago, and full transparency here, Jonathan and I were high school classmates, class of 2000 back in Waterloo, Iowa, Waterloo West High School. We've kind of kept in touch. He has been all over the United States, and I'm sure he'll kind of talk about that in his interview here. But I've just been watching some of the things that Jonathan's been doing in his profession. I just mentioned the accolade that he won last year, and I'm like, we've got to do an episode where we dig into everything that leaders need to know about music education. So, Jonathan, this has been a few months in the works. I appreciate you joining me today. How's the summer going for you, man?
It's going really well. After 16 months of COVID education, I have been decompressing for a few weeks, but, the music educator never stops. So I'm also dreaming of the future of music education. So I'm doing a little bit of rest and relaxation, but also ready to begin the fall.
So your exact title is Director of Orchestras at Pioneer High School, and that's in Ann Arbor, Michigan, correct?
Correct. Yes.
So I know of Ann Arbor as being a Big Ten football fan. Ann Arbor is the home of University of Michigan. Is that correct?
100%. In fact, my high school shares a parking lot with the Big House, the University of Michigan football stadium.
Wow. I've never seen the Big House, but obviously it's legendary in terms of its size and all that. So, hey, why don't you go ahead, share, how did you end up, you've been all over the place. You've been some incredible places. How did you end up in Ann Arbor? And maybe just fill us in on your educational leadership career here.
Sure. I'll try to be brief. As you know, I grew up with you in Waterloo, Iowa, West High. And at the end of high school, I wanted to pursue music therapy as a career. So I looked for the top music therapy schools, and the University of Kansas was one of those schools. So I went there for music therapy, and I started studying there. And then I started getting interested in education. And along the way, I had some big decisions to make. Do I want to go the education route? Do I want to do therapy? And my advisor pulled me in his office when I was thinking about maybe leaving the profession or going to be a performer or some other things. He said, "Don't leave, stay right here." He pulled me in the office. He went and got the rest of the music ed faculty. They surrounded me and said, "You are going into music education because you have the gift at this." And so they would not let me leave till I said yes. And I have not looked back since.
Wow.
So that's the University of Kansas story. And if I'm going to do something, I'm going to go all the way. So my next thought was I want to teach at every corner of the United States and learn about music education. I want to teach at every level as well. I want to be elementary, middle, high school. I want to know it all. So I started applying for jobs and all over the country. I found my first job in Darien, Connecticut as an elementary string director, which was perfect. It was 3 elementary schools where I would travel around. And there's so many benefits of living in Connecticut in that situation. The 45-minute train ride to New York City wasn't so bad.
Wow.
But then there was also the fact that I knew I had some work to do to learn all these stringed instruments to be an effective teacher. So every day for 15 minutes, I practiced every instrument just to get better. And so that was a part of it. It was almost like an extension of that degree. At that point, I wanted to move to another part of the country and explore music education somewhere else. So I applied to the University of Oregon, and they accepted me as an associate conductor as well as a music tech person to help with some tech things. So I got some education paid for where I studied conducting. And I also went forward and created a degree for myself there that was along with the conducting for jazz string education, which was something I was very interested in. So I went ahead and worked on those 2 areas. At that point, I had finished my master's and I was looking for a job. I said, well, let's go somewhere new. So I applied all over the country for the biggest jobs I could find, at all levels. And after a few searches and a few interviews, Pioneer called me to interview. Pioneer High School is one of the more well-known orchestra programs in the country, music departments in general, actually. And so when they called, I was like, yes, I will come and interview. I spent my last money to fly out for the interview, had the interview. They asked me to stay later than my flight, and I could barely afford to change the flight and all that, but I did. And I got the job, went home, had rice and beans, and got the call a few days later. And then I was on my way to Ann Arbor. And so from there, I moved to Ann Arbor, and I've been here for 14 years now. I think I'm entering my
Wow.
14th year.
So I was looking at your, you got a lengthy list of awards, Jonathan. I'm not just saying that. One thing I noticed was Pioneer. You mentioned Pioneer having an outstanding music program. One thing that caught my eye was this Grammy signature school. When I hear the word Grammy, that's a pretty, the Grammys, right? I'm assuming that's us,
Yeah.
the same type thing. What is a Grammy signature school?
Okay, so the Grammy Foundation has an educational extension, or they did for many years, where educational programs with band, orchestra, choir, general music at the high school level can apply to receive some funds from the Grammy Foundation. And it was very, very competitive for many years, several hundred applicants for different things. The one year, Pioneer itself has won, I believe, 7 total Grammys. I have been a part of 3 of those.
Wow.
The Grammy Signature School is a pretty big deal, though, because that says, you're, according to the Grammy Foundation, you're the top music program in the country. And
Oh, wow.
and so that's how that goes. You don't apply every year, though, so it's try to be a little modest about it. But we're very proud of that work. That means your choir program's strong, your band program's strong, your general music is strong, your orchestra program's strong. And, we write essays about why we would be a good fit for this. We talk about the general population of Ann Arbor, and then we submit recordings, which is the best stuff of the year. And my orchestra program and our band and our choir colleagues, we essentially perform professional level literature at the high school level. So we're very proud of that work we do.
Wow. And then I mentioned earlier the big award that you just got this past year was the Michigan String Teacher of the Year. So maybe just how did that all go down? What was your reaction? Any other takeaways from that award?
Yeah, well, like with any profession, there are certain organizations that mean a lot to you, that help you enrich your teaching experience. The American String Teachers Association is the one that is near and dear to my heart. And the Michigan chapter is one that I've been a part of since I've been here. I've actively been a part of their leadership committees. And, this past year, in recognition of my work for over a decade with that organization, I was in a pool with 2 other incredible finalists, and I was just fortunate enough to be chosen as the Michigan String Teacher of the Year this year. So yeah, it's a big honor to me, and it means a lot because I care so much about the organization. It's not one of those things they just hand out. So yeah, that means a lot.
So the story I read said, usually these are reserved for people who've been doing this 20, 30 years. So somebody who's still in their 30s to win this award is not very common. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement. I've always kind of looked at these awards as lifetime achievements more than anything.
Yep,
And so again, and the 2 other finalists are both incredibly wonderful teachers who are, have been around slightly longer than me. So I just feel very fortunate to have been given this honor, for sure.
So the reason I brought you, one of the reasons, obviously the connection we have and the awards you've gotten, but I really have been looking for a guest who I can just pick the brain of in terms of music education. coming from not many administrators have that music education background, a very, very small percent. I played in band up until 8th grade. And then I kind of had to make that choice, that classic choice of, and maybe that's the wrong way of looking at it, but sports or music. And I decided to go the sports route in high school. So I just know very, very little. And it can be difficult being a school administrator, walking into a music classroom and really knowing what I'm looking at and what does good music instruction look like versus not so good. How do I help support music teachers? So John, for these next several minutes, I might just kind of rapid fire a bunch of questions I have that could really help school leaders out there knowing how to approach their music education, their music teachers. So let me start with this. How have you mentioned 14 years, you mentioned these Grammy awards, you mentioned the award that you just won this year. There, again, when I looked at your bio, there was dozens of bullet points I could have picked out. How have you had such sustained success in your position?
Well, the accolades of a music teacher in a music classroom do honestly don't involve trophies, don't involve those things. It involves making meaningful connections with people and with music, period. All the accolades that we were discussing, those don't mean anything to me if I haven't worked to truly get every student engaged in the music classroom, period. So I always think of advocacy and success in the music classroom. It always starts with 5 solid lesson plans that engage students and get their creative juices flowing every single day. Without those things, you've got nothing. You absolutely must have engagement. I think the music teacher's role is to foster and nurture the improvisatory spirit, the idea of being creative, but also the idea of discipline through the musical craft, understanding that precision is something that is valuable in their lives, understanding that to take care of an instrument is a privilege, and it's something that it's a skill that you're going to need down the line to take care of your life materials. There's just so many ways to think about that. But in regards to, I guess, your original question, it's all about consistency and engagement and nurturing that spirit.
Okay. So John, if I'm coming through your room, what would a typical, if I can say that, what would a normal classroom observation or walk through your classroom look like? What would we see? What would be in that great, you mentioned those lessons that you have that you're engaging students. What would we see in your room?
Okay, so for anybody that comes and observes a music classroom, and I will talk about mine specifically, but also talk about in general, you will see a rhythm to a lesson. You will see repetition being done. You will see engagement from front to back of the room. You will see the director sometimes only working with some students and then another time working with other students, and that is okay, because we are working towards a larger picture with ensemble music. Sometimes that means you have to work with a certain group more than others, and that's just how that goes. So, but there's still learning going on. So let's say I'm in an orchestra classroom working with the violins because they have a hard line and it's out of tune. Well, you can get the violas, cellos, and basses to be listening across the room, fingering along with their parts. They can be actively thinking about how their part fits into the other parts. So you will see constant engagement if you come into a music room, even if they're not doing anything. And that is okay. Some of the best learning you do in a music classroom is with your ears. Mm-hmm. So, the amount of times in any ensemble, choir, band, orchestra, where we say, listen across the room, because how your part fits in with another, that collaborative aspect is just so crucial. So you're going to see a lot of engagement. You're going to see a lot of questions from the podium saying, okay, I'm working with the violas. Okay, Violas, we're a little out of tune there. Violins, listen carefully. Tell me which note it is. And then they play the notes. Violin 7, can you tell me? Or John, or whatever your name is, tell me, blah, blah, blah. And then they help engage. Okay, let's play it all together. Okay, not quite good. Why wasn't it good? Basses? Oh, it's because this was happening. Okay, all right, let's try it again. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, cellos, how could that improve? Okay, let's go. So you're going to be seeing me as a essential traffic cop with a lot of questions going out and engagement coming back. And that is how certain lessons go. Now that's my classroom. I have a very quick pace, one that doesn't work for everyone. There are many ways to success in a music ensemble classroom. Others say, okay, I'm going to work with the seconds right now. Cellos and violas, just take a second and look at your own part quietly and go together. There's just so many ways. Teachers have to use their kind of podium personality to get the most out of their students and just be authentic. And if the students know that you want them to sound good, even if that means you being a little hard on them sometimes, they will follow you anywhere. If the teacher kind of lets something go, immediately, just think about any teacher you've ever had, Jared. If they just let something go, where does your respect for them go? Right? Down the tubes. So they have to know that you actively care about them getting better, and then they'll follow you.
So how else? I have a feeling, I mean, you've talked about relationships, how being able to be hard on a kid, but yet they respect you. You have, I expect. How else besides in that classroom environment are you trying to build those relationships with the kids? Is there stuff that goes on outside lessons? What else can you share? What else should we be seeing from a music teacher, maybe outside of that lesson?
Yeah, outside of the lesson, I mean, most music programs at the high school level, first of all, that teacher is going to get to know them for 4 years. So they are, besides the counselors in the building, they're the ones that are going to know the students better than anybody else.
Great point.
The amount of times counselors have come down and asked me, how is this student doing? They're not engaging in these classes. And then I pull them aside and I say, hey, algebra. And they're like, yeah, I know. I'm like, get on it. I mean, so you develop that relationship over time because you've earned their trust. And once you've earned people's trust and you're consistent about it, they'll work for you. So, I mean, other things, when you have travel and you have performances, just like a game and a sport, you have that bond. It's something that you all have in common for that moment in time. And for better or worse, however it went, when you leave the stage, just like when you leave a game, you all feel a certain way about it. You come back together, you talk about it, say, next time we're going to get better in this, or, hey, we nailed that. That was fantastic. It's that community. It's that team building. And, those are the beautiful parts of it. Because you have students in your school that may not be able to catch a football, but my goodness, can they play some beautiful music on their instrument? And that's their sport. And they're getting all the same things and then some, all the same skills.
I've literally written down like 5 extra questions that I'm like, oh, I want to ask about this. I want to ask about that. What do you think is a reasonable amount of time for for your group lesson or your individual lessons? Talk about your lesson structure, because from a building administrator who doesn't have music background, I'm just like, do your thing. I don't know. There's always kind of that delicate balance between you want to pull a kid into your lessons, but you want to respect, because usually they're getting pulled from the classroom. So what is that magic sweet spot for how much time you should be able to get kids? And are you pulling them from their other, their normal classes? And how does that work? What advice do you have for school leaders on that?
Okay, so there are many different models of how I will talk high school, but this can go through middle and elementary models of how music education works in a school. There are pull-out programs where students are pulled out of their other classes to take lessons during the day, and then there may be a rehearsal in the morning or at night. That's one model. There are other models where, like ours, where it's just curriculum. You show up every day. It's a part of it. It's as strong as all of your core curriculum. It's every day. It's consistent, 50 minutes. And that's another part of it. There are others that are just before and after school, which to be honest with you, it's just not consistent. Think about any, I'll put it this way. If you wanted to have a sport and you just want them to practice 1 day a week in the morning, and between then they're not supposed to do anything. How does that work? That's not going to get anywhere. Consistent daily work is what you do. And so the strongest music programs have that consistency as much as possible to be in front of that teacher. So my situation is, the arts are valued as strong as sports in any academic you could ever think of in this district. We have arrangements between sports and music that we know exactly when a kid's going to a game instead of a concert, and vice versa. It's equal. And in academics, it's the same thing. And that's with that, it gives us the power and ability to nurture all this spirit. And that's why you get these accolades. And that's why students come running for it. People transfer, people, rent apartments in our district to get to our school. That's what happens. So I don't exactly know your original question, but I wanted to make sure I understand people understand that there's different approaches to the music education.
So you've got your kids every day for 50 minutes.
Yes.
When do you have, I'm guessing you do, this might be a dumb question, do you have individual lessons with those kids at after school hours, or group lessons, or what does the lesson structure look like then?
We do not have a lesson program in Ann Arbor. It's rehearsal.
Wow.
So some districts do independent pull-out lessons, but for us, we do the magic all at the same time. I'm teaching the violas, cellos, basses, violins at the exact same time. So and they call that one prep, which is hilarious because it's completely different animals. But so we are doing that all at the same time, and we kind of find common grounds to work through, and we're experts at that. Threading the needle with the same thread from just slightly different angles, and it's that's what music teachers do so great. But but there are other places that do pull-out programs, and those are very successful if you have administrators who will support that music teacher. That music teacher is not a glorified babysitter. That's not their job. Their job is to educate, and serious music teachers know that. They're going to use that time wisely, and those students are going to go back to that classroom, and they're going to have received that enrichment. And those students know if they're going to get this opportunity, they have to step up in their academics too. So if you're looking at a music teacher that has a pull-out program, most of the time, those kids are on point because they know their time's not going to be wasted. The minute they waste time in a music, I haven't heard of a single music teacher that is sitting around waiting for time to pass. We're always going. There's something else to do always. So
when I was, I've been out of the principalship for a few years now, but I remember a few times a music teacher, and maybe, again, this is just, I'm going to share a story, and you might say that is totally crazy. I can't believe that. But a few times a teacher would come to me and say, hey, this kid wants to quit. And they would kind of leave it in my hands as the administrator. Like, they're saying, like, I don't want them to quit. Can you force them? It might've been like mid-semester, or maybe it was mid-year. They want to quit mid-year. How do you handle, I'm guessing kids really love your class, so this probably doesn't happen too often, but when a kid does want to quit, what approach does the music teacher take? And what do you want from the administrator in those instances?
There are a few things you need to know, Jared, about that, because it does happen at all levels. Particularly during COVID, that was happening. But the thing is, if a student just walks away, think about all that they've invested. They may have an instrument from the school. They may have music from the school. They may have a uniform from the school. That could be $1,500 worth of materials. And if there's not a checkpoint with that teacher to really let them go, you could lose all that. And, I've learned that the hard way. So I advise anybody in that situation usually they go to their counselors, right? And they want to make a change. We have a situation with our counselors, which is a good one, where if they approach a counselor about leaving, they say, we need to sit down with the director and your parents. And you just talk through the whole option and say, here's what, here you can be forthright with why you want to leave. It's no problem. The music teacher will never hold it against you, but let's talk about all the options, the good and bad and ugly about this. And if at the end of that conversation, the student wants to leave, usually I let them go. because, we don't want somebody to just be forced into a position. However, on our syllabus at the beginning of the year, it says this is a 1-year class. So if they leave in the middle of the semester, when you're preparing for a concert, it says all over everything, 1-year class. And to leave must require administrator approval with counselor approval. And it's for all those reasons we talked about. Usually what happens in that meeting is I sit down, we're talking, and I hear them out. I just say, please just tell me. And if it's something I've done, let me know. I'm more than happy to have the conversation. And then I say, well, what if for this next semester, if I tweak this little thing about how I'm working with you, can you give me that one more semester to prove to you that this class is valuable to you? And if not, we'll shake hands and say, fare thee well. Most of the time they stay. And usually by the end of that year, they're back the next year. But having that face-to-face opportunity to leave the program, I think, is very valuable. And it could become financially valuable based on the instruments they have and things.
So earlier when I asked you, what's the key, what are the metrics you look at for an effective program, and you really hit hard on just building those relationships. Let's talk, I'm curious, let's talk about like performance ratings, size of program, award-winning musicians, just overall quality of public performance. Outside of building those relationships, as a school leader, what should I be looking at? Is it the size of the program that matters? Is it their Division I ratings? Like what should we be looking at to determine the effectiveness of the teacher?
I think you need to be careful when it comes to performance ratings. I will be very forthright with you, because there are years that you have some of the most hardworking students imaginable, but they can't perform at a level of the previous year. And that could be for numerous occasions. With the high school level, if your middle school teachers, let's say you had a transition of a middle school teacher and suddenly like a certain level has dropped off, that's not the high school teacher's fault. It's a situation where you kind of have to rebuild and rebrand and represent how you teach a little bit. So I get really, really nervous about people who use that as their metric for success. I think when you have students at a performance that look happy, are engaged, and you have parents that are actively involved, that says a lot about what that teacher is doing positively. When you have your music students, asking to do more citizenship type things in your building, or your teacher is trying to reach out to other parts of your curriculum and connect, these are all signs that they're trying to grow and there's hunger for more. But again, advocacy really begins with the talk of the students and the parents. Now, numbers, there are several reasons numbers could be a very positive thing to look at, but let's talk about COVID for a second. The amount of music programs that are now down like 25%, and they're fighting to keep FTE, to keep their programs alive through no fault of their own. Those students didn't sign up for ensemble. They signed up for ensemble, they didn't sign up for online music instruction. So just like everybody else, music teachers had to adapt. And with that, I just highly encourage administrators to give those teachers a chance to regroup the ensemble dynamic. But numbers, I don't think, so here's another example. Let's say we have a really great middle school, which I will not mention specifically, who has always had a history of being one of the greatest in the state. Strong numbers, strong support all the way through. Well, that middle school, with one administrator deciding that there was no longer a place for that orchestra to live, so now they're living on stage and they're teaching in the wings of the auditorium during like other things. And this is one of the most loved programs in the state. And now that teacher's done everything they can to keep that program strong, and it's dwindling a little bit. And you can't look at the teacher as the reason for that. Sure. There's just too many other moving parts. So music teachers are great at adapting, but we are not superheroes.
Mhm.
So us teaching in boiler rooms, us teaching in entryways, you think this is crazy. It's not, it's true. I took baritone lessons in a boiler room in Waterloo, that's where I was. Um, and just maybe a little dignity if you can find a way to get that teacher a room so they feel a part of the fabric of the school, So things like that can really hurt a program quickly. Yeah.
I was gonna try to, and maybe you already answered this. I was gonna try to see if you could give me like a rule of thumb to follow, like meaning if you have so many students in a building, you should have at least this number of kids in your music program. So can you give me any rule, like the absolute bare minimum, if that makes sense? Because a lot of time, and maybe I'm approaching it from the wrong way, and if I am, you can push back. But if you've got 1,000 kids in a building, you should have at least this number of kids in your program. Can you give me a rule of thumb there, or is that just too hard to say?
That's a very difficult thing to do. It's a very difficult thing to do because sometimes it's, a 200-person band program and a 50-person choir program. And how does that all work?
Hmm.
I think more importantly, Jared, I know you want the number.
Dang it. That's
Desperate for
fine.
the number. But more importantly is what classes are you offering that serve the community you teach? It does not have to be ensemble at all. I think some of the best classes that are going to get the most engagement, music industry, guitar, piano, these classes really reach out to the general public because, band orchestra choir is not for everybody. So, one of the things we're most proud of is our music industry course, where we put them in together into bands, and there's a general manager, and there's people that help them find gigs in the community. Can you imagine, that type of thing would just people would gravitate towards. So, you want a number? I'm not going to give it to you. I will say our school is probably 46% in the music program.
Wow. Okay.
That's where it was pre-COVID.
Sure. Well, you brought up a good point. I want to ask you about that. Participating in two or maybe even three, not very often, but music, a kid who wants to be in orchestra and choir, and maybe they want to be in band too, which doesn't happen too often, but I've seen some kids doing that. What should our mindset be? Should we encourage kids to be in as many as possible? From your perspective, is that a good way of doing it? Or do you want to start them to kind of go down one path or the other? What would you say? What advice would you give us?
Um, Sometimes it depends on the student. I will say I have students in all three at the same time, and they make it work because you can take a lot of classes online. A lot of times it does depend on the work ethic of the student. I mean, but then you look at your school who has students in multiple. Um, we have people in science Olympiad, and then they have people in debate. They have people in all these things. It's very similar type of um, energy you put forward, or the amount of athletes who have multiple sports. They have a travel team, and then they have their other team going at the same time. So if a kid is really engaged and a student wants to be a part of that music program, I see no reason to hold them back from it. There are careers in this, believe it or not.
Yeah.
There are ways to make money in this. There are ways to find a home in the arts. And it ultimately it does that thing that you can't quantify. It nurtures the heart and the spirit. And you need a little of that in your life. So some kids need that more than ever in high school.
A lot of people listening work in low income schools, low income districts.
Mhm.
A lot of times, right or wrong, Jonathan, when we think of especially band and especially orchestra, we're thinking money, we're thinking affluent families, we're thinking college, parents who are in college. So give us some advice for people who are in low income schools listening. Like, what should they expect? Should they lower their expectations for their teachers and their programs? What advice can you share for those people?
I think the expectations shift. They're not lower, they're just different. The I think you can find cheap courses to offer. A guitar class is not that expensive to run. Neither is a voice class or a music industry course or a music theory course or a music tech course where they're, writing music on a computer. Those are not expensive to run. So if you're going to start something, start one of those just to get the interest going. In regards to ensemble, you just need to, I don't think you lower the expectation, but you have to understand that you're working with just a different set of materials. Most likely, the instruments themselves may not be able to be upkept as much. Students don't have them themselves, so you have to take more of that into your budget with the school. And you just have to find caretakers of your music program who understand that caring for these instruments is a valuable thing. And I'm not sure if I'm answering that question 100%, maybe the direction you're going, but I know of some I know of some schools that are very low income that have very successful programs, but the metric is more about kind of how happy they are to be having an opportunity to create art,
Mm-hmm.
and music.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And like I mentioned, I'm keep writing down questions. They keep popping in my head here. What do you, again, I'm trying to get some questions that the school leaders might have. Sometimes I've been in buildings where the teacher will have one class or maybe two classes, like a 9th, 10th grade band, 11th, 12th grade band. It's an
Mhm.
8-period day. They've got two classes, and the rest of the day is those pull-out lessons.
Mhm.
Is that a good and is that a good use of time of that teacher? Is that course load too little? Should that teacher have maybe half their days filled with actual classes in the schedule? What are your thoughts? Like, how busy? Because sometimes we think, oh man, that teacher's not busy. And sometimes that perception's right. Sometimes that perception's wrong. Like, what do you think? What should we be seeing in terms of course load for that teacher?
Let's say if you have two ensembles and a pull-out program, so that's essentially 2 hours a day for a large ensemble. They're going to need an hour to prep because I know they're different. Obviously, contract, you have to have an hour to prep. But those pull-out lessons are so valuable. When I came to Ann Arbor and I realized they didn't have them, that was a little deflating to me because that's where you build more connection. I mean, anytime you can get a smaller group together to give them the feedback they need, that's the win. Particularly in a community, if there's not money for private lessons outside of the school, that's what you need. My community has money for private lessons outside the school.
Okay.
But the more you can get the teacher in front of smaller groups, the better.
Is it fair? So let's just go back to that 8-period day.
Okay.
Okay. And they've got the two ensembles, and then should they, just like any other teacher, most teachers will have that one period, that one planning period. Should they probably have small, pullouts for the other, I guess it'd be 5 periods? Is that, and you're nodding your head, yes. Is that a realistic expectation? Just like any other teacher, you should be basically with students 7 periods a day out of 8? Or is that, or is there different? Is that too much? You tell me.
Well, it also depends on, a lot of music teachers have to travel to other schools. So if you're fortunate enough to have a teacher in one building, I think that's a great use of their time. Or the pullout should be designed based on small instrument type, violins of this level, cellos, trumpets, percussion of this level, and those pullouts add up. And so, it may look like, oh, you're only teaching 2 classes, but those pull-ups, you have to prep for each one of those pullouts. You have so many preps. But those smaller sections, I think to answer your question, I think it's very realistic for sure. If you're a 1.0 in one building.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about interviews. So, again, you're doing a great job answering these questions. A lot of times when we have a music opening, at least the music openings that I've been a part of, a lot of times we'll bring in fresh college graduates, and they all kind of, they're all pretty talented in the interview room. It's just hard to tell who's going to be best for our program? What should we be looking for? And maybe not just college graduates, but any interview. What are the specific things we should be looking for, asking about, looking for in references when we're trying to figure out who's really going to be dynamic in our program?
That's another beautifully big question. Because, elementary has certain things you want to look
Yep.
for. High school, I'm going to stick with my area, which is instrumental music at the secondary level. I'll stick there. Oftentimes you're watching them do a rehearsal or work with students, right? And you're kind of trying to figure out how, if it's the right fit. Usually the best candidates that I've seen at the end of their 7 or 8 minutes want to do more. They're like eager to keep going. I think if you have 7 or 8 minutes and you care about this craft, you're going to use every single second and you're going to work hard to make the greatest sound by the end of those 7 or 8 seconds. I've seen candidates come in that just try to get the students to laugh, or they turn the music upside down for a silly moment because they think that's what administrators are looking for, a happy child, which is maybe true, but there's yay music and there's yay music. And they need to make music. That's why they're in the room. We don't need a cheerleader. So there are ways to get there in that short amount of time. It's look at the students for engagement to front to back a section. Use your net, even if you're not a musician, use your instincts. Are they sounding better? Are they targeting the thing that sounded the worst at the beginning? Sometimes those 7 or 8 minutes they come in, they start going and the violins fall apart. If they completely ignore the violins falling apart, then they're not doing their job. They have to address that next. So even the amateur ear understands when something doesn't sound great, right? So I think that's the type of person you want in your program. If they're done and they're wondering if they still have any time left, and kids pick up on that. They need to be pushed, and they need to understand that there's always more. Okay. Music is beautiful that way.
Okay.
Here's the story. Here's why it's beautiful. You ready?
Yeah.
Happy birthday. 25 notes. Okay? 25 notes for happy birthday. If I were to sing happy birthday and miss one note, would you know?
I think so. Yeah.
You would know. Okay. If I were to miss 5 notes, would you know?
I hope I'm answering these right. I mean, we all know how the tune goes, so I would probably know. I don't know. Maybe if you're flat, or I don't know. I would definitely know the tune. Maybe I'm answering it wrong here, Jonathan. I'm sorry.
So you're answering it great. So if you're at 80% getting the notes right of happy birthday, are you going to get that warm, fuzzy feeling on your birthday? No.
Sure.
Happy birthday has got to sound perfect. You know what it sounds like. So and that's just notes. That's not even the details, the nuance, the vibrato use, the dynamic, the character of the music. If you think you got it all by just the notes, we have more we can go. We can go deeper. Sure. And I don't know a single person that's happy with 80%, well, maybe in your math class, like, that was pretty good.
Sure. Yeah.
No, we have a higher standard we hold ourselves to.
Yeah. Anyway. Jonathan, I got another question for you here. Sure. So say a music leader, or I'm sorry, school leader they've got a financial crunch here. Maybe they're a district office leader listening in, and I've been in so many of these meetings where music is one of the first things that's brought up. Well, let's get rid of orchestra. Let's get rid of band, whatever it might be. What would you say? Like, you're obviously passionate about music. You've done all these amazing things. Like, what would you say to that person who's saying, you know what, let's cut a music program?
Where to begin? Okay. I mean, first of all, isn't it our job as educators to nurture the whole human being? I mean, to give them the opportunities to care about things beyond their academics. It's just what it is, Okay. I mean, we could go into how it helps with like language and reasoning. We could talk about how it helps with memorization, or how about how it helps with your coordination, or how about it helps keeps kids engaged in school. There are kids that go to school just for that music class because it's what keeps them going. How it helps with their emotional development, how it helps with pattern recognition, how it can be relaxing and give you a break between your 5 APs, how it can help you teach discipline within an instrument and make sure you care about it, how it helps, and there's all sorts of things. Helps with your creative thinking. It helps with your organizational process. There's so many things. Spatial intelligence, how about that? How about that? How about teamwork? How about some teamwork? How about risk taking? You don't think a performance where you do something a little hard is a little challenging? That's a risk and you learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
Self-confidence. How about that? How about self-confidence? I know I didn't have any self-confidence when you and I went to school together until I picked up this guy, this bass, this double bass, and it gave me all the self-confidence in the world.
Sure.
So I don't know if that is.
No, that's good. I mean, you listed off a couple dozen ideas there. So I just know it comes up. I mean, I've been in these meetings, these budget meetings in multiple districts, and I feel like especially orchestra is the one that comes up first. And I haven't really been in those positions. I have not been in position to be the decision maker. I'm just there to kind of listen, but it always, and you've seen a lot of orchestra programs across the country be cut.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. If you have an orchestra program that's pretty robust or has a lot of students in it, have you ever thought about it, how it saves you money in the long run? You get 50 kids in a classroom instead of 25.
Good point. It usually does seem like the programs that get cut are the programs that are floundering that I've seen.
I understand.
Usually, but that's a great point. If you could
We save the district so much money. I have 200 kids I teach. I save them so much money.
Yeah, that's a good point.
No, Jonathan, but I know.
Yep. One more question, and then we're going to go kind of get you out of here. I heard you got to do some dishes tonight.
I do.
For giving up your time. The wife's counting on you. So to give up you got 3 little ones at home. Is that correct? Like little ones, not just like 5 and 7.
3 and under. And in order to talk to you right now, Jared, I have to do dishes tonight. So make these questions good, my friend.
Well, I feel honored that you gave up the time and that you're going to do the dishes for us later. The one last question I got for you is, what is the highlight of your professional career?
The first rehearsal I had with my students after I had a major medical crisis in 2014. I had 2 strokes the weekend before school started, and I was laying in my apartment, and I found through very many miracles, I found my way to a hospital where I had to relearn to walk, to relearn to talk, to relearn to use my left side. And after several months of rehabilitation, PT, all the things you have to do, and neurology appointments, I was able to step in my classroom a few months later and rehearse with that orchestra for the first time. And when I did that and I knew I could do it successfully, I think that moment when I felt like I can still do this, the thing that I'm most passionate about in the world, I think that was the most beautiful day.
Wow. I get to imagine there were some high emotions in that room. For you,
there were a lot of high emotions in that room, and one little secret of that was 2 weeks later was the deadline for the Grammy recording, and we only had 2 weeks to put that music together when we won that year.
Wow.
They stepped up and worked harder than they ever have.
Wow. That's incredible. That's cool. Very cool. Well, hey, if you're joining us late, I'm speaking with Jonathan Glawe, the 2021 Michigan String Teacher of the Year. He's the director of orchestras at Pioneer High School in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And we mentioned it earlier. Pioneer High School has been named a Grammy signature school, which identifies them as one of the, if not the top music program in the nation. So Hey, John, I've got you for about 10 minutes. I've got about 8 questions. Let's whip through these so you can go hang
Sure.
out with the family, okay?
Sounds good.
We're visiting the Ann Arbor area. Where's one place we've got to check out?
Oh, Zingerman's Roadhouse, Bakery, or Deli.
Whoa. There's all
Anyone.
kinds of good Roadhouse and deli and bakery all in one.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic. And they're 3 different locations. The deli, if you like your Reuben, Bakehouse, if you like your cinnamon roll.
Wow. Wow. I love it. Okay. What is one? You've heard the show before, so I hope I don't have to give you. I always say I'm going to scrap this one and then I forget it by the time we get. What's one sneaky good, like life improvement purchase you've made? Sneaky good purchase.
The moment I realized I couldn't get 3 car seats across in my Nissan, I went and bought a minivan, and there ain't no shame. There ain't no shame in my game. I'm happy with my minivan. I love every bit of it.
So
Sneaky, great purpose.
what type of what make and model and would you, it sound like you're happy with it. So what would you recommend to other parents out there?
I love the Honda Odyssey. I'm just saying it works great. Everything about it. And how those side doors close if you push a button, it's like, whoa.
So I'm glad this used to be an under $50 question. So I'm glad I took that part off because that would have been out of the question there, obviously. Hey, what is one book that has greatly influenced your life?
The Inner Game of Tennis by Timothy Galway. There's The Inner Game of Music as well, but I think the tennis one is even more up my alley. It's basically a book that talks about how you work through nervousness and self-doubt and distraction to find kind of a relaxed concentration in your daily work. Yeah, and that's essentially that book. It's worth your time.
Is that an older book, or has it been around for a while, or
it's been around quite a while? I want to say about 20 years now, maybe 15, 20 years. Yeah.
What is one phone app that has positively impacted your life?
I deleted my social media for the summer, and honestly, that's the best thing that I could have done, because I'm just getting family time, and I needed it desperately.
So you're off Facebook. What else? Was there any other social media that you did?
Yeah, I had the Twitter for my orchestra program and some of the other stuff. I used to be all about it, and I still am in some ways, but I needed to not be, just for a while, just to fill the tank.
How long did it take you to get used to that? Did it take you a few days to kind of get used to, or were you boom right off the bat? You were good with it.
I was pretty good with it.
Okay.
I was shocked at how easy it was. Actually, I felt more relaxed the next day than I had in a long time. Wow. And it's funny because I use Facebook religiously for professional reasons. I've been hired for a lot of gigs and things through Facebook, but I just did it, and I felt great. So I will come back, but I'm on a hiatus. So that's not answering your question, but
no. I think it's a good, I mean, you could still answer it if you want, but I think that's a great answer.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're professional? I mean, you want to spend time with the family. My concern is if I don't do some of those things, some of the opportunity, some of the things I'm working with the, my brand, whatever you want to call it, kind of like with you, with your orchestra. Do you feel like that slipped at all? Or do you feel like, no, it hasn't really skipped a beat?
I think, the more you work, the more I worked on developing a social media presence, the least happy I was, and the least authentic I think my friendships were. And when you go ahead and take away that medium and you start calling or texting or having longer conversations, you kind of find out more about yourself than when you actually get a little sliver of everybody. Okay. I don't know if that makes any sense. It makes sense to me.
Makes sense. Can you recall, I mean, you've had some incredible jobs. Can you recall a job you applied for but did not get?
Yes. 2 days before Pioneer, I interviewed for a job in Oregon, and it was one of the top orchestra programs in Oregon. And I was a finalist. I did the interview. I thought it went really well. They called me the next day and say, look, you rehearsed the orchestra the best. You had the strongest presence on the podium. They sounded better under you. You have more qualifications, all these things, but you didn't play the violin well enough. That's what they said to me. And I said, okay. And I'm a bass player. I don't play the violin, but I went for it. So then 2 days later, I was at Pioneer, and all those other things that I do well, that's what they wanted. So it's just what people look for. And so I learned that your skills are not necessarily suited for every position, and it turned out to be the right one.
I was going to ask you that earlier. Does it matter? Is that something that's important, that the music teacher plays the instrument with the kids, that they've put the time in? You're nodding your head yes. Anything you want to add to that?
It doesn't always have to be, and particularly for string and band teachers, sometimes you don't have people who are like, they're a trumpet player but they're teaching orchestra. As long as they're actively engaged and if they're a good musician at the high school level, like if that teacher's a good musician, they can go very far. If that teacher is a mediocre or not a great musician and they don't play that instrument, and they have and they're not actively trying to get better at that, that's a sign that maybe that's not the right fit. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I always think, and just for administrators out there, if you really want to know how a student or a teacher plays, have them play in the interview. They need to play something on their primary instrument. See what chops they have. How good can they be on that primary instrument? Because that gives you the total musical package. How you get there, those are things that can be filled in.
That's a good tip. That's a good tip. Yeah. Speaking of tips, your best tip for being productive, and you already kind of talked about maybe being off of social media, which maybe is helping with clear your mind. And but what's another tip for being productive?
I have a handbook for everything in my life. I have a running list of frequently asked questions from my parents, my students, that I've had for like a decade. And instead of constantly answering the same question in an email return, I send them the link to the frequently asked questions. And instead of 15 to 20 questions about starting the year, I get one, maybe two. And that question gets put on that list. The next year, it's always a goal of mine to have nobody ask any questions. So if you're ever interested, man, I will share you the handbook to my life. And it's just, there's a handbook for solo ensemble. There's a handbook for the orchestra program in general. There's a handbook for the parent organization, the handbook for the mentorship committee. There's a handbook for uniforms. There's a handbook for instrument maintenance. There's a handbook for everything.
Do you think any music, I mean, that sounds brilliant. Do you think would it be hard for music teacher to kind of start accumulating that? Because I do feel like that probably would, they probably struggle having to answer all those questions when you've got so many kids and you've got, parents are heavily involved in those things. Would you recommend that practice for other music teachers?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm teaching a course through Vandercook College right now about this very thing. Just the whole idea of how excellence is created by you maximizing your time and learning from your mistakes and keeping documentation of what happened previously. So not just for the benefit of you, but ultimately as the caretaker of a music program now, you're going to hand that to somebody else. And somebody else has to help that program continue to flourish. And we're caretakers. That's what I call it. We're not teachers, we're caretakers. Once we hand it over, can they keep it going successfully? Yeah, it's so crucial to have those documents. And I think that's one of my big goals right now, is to help young teachers develop those strategies.
What is your one big goal you are currently working on?
Reimagining music education.
Keep going, man. What does that mean?
Here's the question. The question is the ensemble setting and the competitive spirit of an ensemble setting and playing European composers and playing music that is not in the wheelhouse of the students today. Is that hurting the profession? Is it a time to evolve? Is there a different way of doing things? Whenever we get to a question where we play a piece of music and you're like, that didn't really go well, really ask yourself, was it the teaching, or was it that this wasn't the right choice in general? Or even with somebody really passionate about it, they couldn't get it engaged. What is it? So my whole thing is right now is trying to play contemporary composers, trying to play music that the students know, trying to play very specifically music by colored composers, female composers, LGBTQ, all that. We're trying our best to diversify our literature, but also bringing those guests in to be in front of those students to work with students. That's a huge conversation, and it's one that we're having really deeply right now all across music. So the whole idea when I was talking earlier about like a music industry course or some course that has music tech where you can write your own beats. I mean, I think that is a huge positive investment of the future of music education and finding ways for those classes to shine.
Do you feel like some of the more traditional judges look down on using like contemporary music? Does that make sense? Is that a
Yeah.
stupid question?
No. There are these state lists of repertoire that people, they want you to play from. And some of those lists were, written in 1970s, 50s, 60s. If those lists haven't been updated in the past 20 years, there's a good chance you got a problem. There's a really good chance.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. It just seems, I'm just a lot like, education at times. I feel like we're stuck in the 1970s or whatever it is. My theory is that sometimes in music educate, the purists, the people who've been doing this for a while are like, nope, you've got to use the classics. I don't know if there's still, that's just my guess. That's my theory, but
yeah, well, the really competitive driven schools still stick to those lists tremendously, but the real new invigorating movement right now is everything but.
Okay. Very cool, man. Hey, is there anything we didn't talk about you would like the audience to know? We covered a lot of stuff. I didn't get to all my questions, but is there anything you wanted to share before we take off here?
No, I just got to say thank you, Jared, for your support of music educators and what you're doing here. That is so valuable. When you're trying, for any administrators out there, if you're trying to get a sense of how your music program is doing, don't be afraid to invite that music teacher to be a part of the culture of your building. Sometimes they have to go to multiple buildings, but make sure that they have a say in what's happening in your building. You'd be surprised. There are a lot of music teachers that want to help in every aspect. So support your music program, be a patron, be an enthusiast. If you have a great caretaker, listen to them and know that they're doing really great work. And if you don't have a great caretaker, hold them accountable, because music teachers want excellence too, and try to find it.
Okay, Jonathan, I always end with, where can our audience connect with you? It sounds like social media is out of the question at this point, which is
At this moment,
no worries at all. So should they just go to the Pioneer Orchestra website, the Ann Arbor, where should they go?
Yeah, aapioneerorchestras.org is where my orchestra program lives. We also have a YouTube channel,
nice.
YouTube/PHS Orchestras. You'll find several videos from my tenure. I am on Facebook at the end of the summer again, so you could find me there. And you can Google me and find all the goods, bads, and uglies that people say about teachers online. So there's that as well.
So I never did actually spell your name. It's Glawe, but it's spelled Glawe. So it's a little tricky there. I've known Jonathan long enough to make sure I said that right, but It is a Glawe. So Jonathan, thank you so much for joining. That was a lot of fun. I feel like we could have gone for 2 hours because I still had so many things to ask you.
Yep.
Maybe we'll bring you back on after a little while and cover some more questions with you.
100%. And I hope I didn't go on too long there for you.
No, you're great, man. Well, hey, I will let you go and go see the wife, go see the kid. What are the kids' names again?
Amara, Avery, and Adeline.
Oh, all A's, huh?
Yeah, we just kept going.
I mean, you're in Ann Arbor, so why not,
Yeah, that's 100% right. Yeah.
All right, man. Hey, thank you so much. And keep up the great work. And we will be following you and your progress and the Pioneer Orchestra from afar. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Jared.